Victoria Stasiuk, and I'm the project manager of the Wiki Wednesday webinar series. We've been funded by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Wikimedia Foundation. This webinar series is produced by Victoria Stasiuk and Associates and Navino Evans, co-founder of Histropedia, based in the United Kingdom. Navino has been the technical advisor for the first and the second of the Wiki Wednesday series. We have some people still coming in, but I don't want to delay things too much. I'd just like to say there's sort of two components of the agenda. A word about Jason. Jason, thank you very much for joining us today. We're very honored to have you with us. And what's exciting about your role is that you've been in the community since 2014 as an editor. And in August 2017, your employer, the National Library of Wales, appointed you as a permanent Wikimedian to their staff. So we're interested in hearing what you have to say about this role and how it's changed over time.
Okay, right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Yes, so I'm Jason. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit about sort of this journey that the National Library of Wales has been on with Wikipedia and Wikimedia more broadly, and some of the kind of benefits and opportunities that have arisen as a result of our partnership. So going back to the beginning, in 2013, the National Library of Wales decided it would no longer claim any right to digital images where the original images were out of copyright. So it was placing all its out of copyright material into the public domain. And in short, it did this in order to remove barriers to access and to encourage reuse of this content that we had. And it was this change in policy that eventually led to the appointment of a Wikipedian in residence. I'm not sure how I can move. Can you move the slide on? I'm not sure how.
I can help with that.
Thank you. Fab. Okay. So if we think about the mission of a library in the context of the digital age, what it really says, and this is our mission statement at the National Library of Wales, but a lot of cultural institutions will have a similar mission statement. And what this really says is that our role is to give access to knowledge. And it doesn't normally, anyway, specify how or where that access should be given. It's about the most efficient ways, the best ways of giving the broadest, widest access to knowledge. So in a digital context, increasingly people go online to find information, and they expect to be able to access information online. And of course, Wikipedia is one of the places that people most often land when they are looking for information on the internet. And even if you don't go directly to Wikipedia, you might ask Alexa or Google a question. More often than not, those services point back to Wikipedia because it's this massive, open, freely available source of knowledge. And so these big companies, they're tapping into that knowledge in order to provide answers to all the questions that we ask our digital assistants. And of course, AI, which is trained on lots of information from across the web, but Wikipedia is a massive part of that. So it's really an integral part of digital knowledge is this Wikipedia ecosystem. So our open access policy aligns strongly with this mission of giving access as widely as possible for the benefit of the people. So being open is really increasingly seen by organizations as the best way of them being able to deliver their mission. So the library saw Wikipedia as a platform for helping us to actually take this policy and proactively go after it and implement it and get as big an impact from that policy decision as possible. If I could have the next slide, please. So a little word on why Wikipedia, and I think we've kind of touched on this already on the previous slide, but if you look at the numbers around Wikipedia, they're really huge and nothing really compares to them. So there are 39 million articles across nearly 300 languages. And when we started the Welsh Wikipedia, we have a Welsh language Wikipedia that had 80,000 articles when we started 7 or 8 years ago. And that's now more than tripled to nearly 300,000 articles. And even the Welsh language content is getting 90 million views a year. So these figures, they absolutely dwarf the kind of exposure that we can get through our own website alone. Next slide, please. So if we think of Wikipedia as a global shopfront for information, it makes sense that libraries and museums, the keepers of knowledge, are inside that shop, improving quality, being involved with that community, and the discussions around how information should be presented, and ensuring that gaps in knowledge are filled in wherever possible. And it's important to note as well, from our perspective, it's not hugely important to us that people know that the knowledge that they're accessing comes from our institution. So it might be that they've glanced at an image in a Wikipedia article, or they've read a paragraph that has been written by someone at an event that we've hosted. It's not really important to us that they know that information has come from our institution. As long as we know that someone has benefited from that information, and we can get that from the kind of viewing figures, etc., then that's what's really important, is knowing that we've given value and we've expanded our reach through Wikipedia content. Next slide. So what does a Wikimedian in residence do? And what is a Wikimedian in residence? So some residents focus solely on writing Wikipedia articles, and you'll quite often hear that term Wikipedian in residence rather than Wikimedian. But increasingly, these residencies sort of span more than just Wikipedia. So Wikimedia is a collection of projects. Wikipedia is just one of them. So you have Wikidata, which is an open data platform. You have Wikimedia Commons, where there's all sorts of openly licensed media that can be used on Wiki or elsewhere. There's Wikisource, which is like a free open library. So there's all these different platforms. So and that's why often you'll hear Wikimedian in residence rather than Wikipedian, because it kind of spans all these different projects that come under the Wikimedia umbrella. So our project at the National Library was initially focused on training new editors, improving content relating to Wales and in Welsh on Wikipedia, and engaging local volunteers. So training people, giving them the skills and the confidence to edit Wikipedia themselves. And also sharing digital content, those openly licensed images that we had at the library on an open license to Wikimedia Commons, so that they could be used in Wikipedia articles. So over time, our work has evolved, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I go along. So these were the kind of the initial goals, and every residency is different, but these were the kind of agreed goals at the beginning of our residency. Next slide, please. So as the residency progressed, we began to realize that Wikipedia had a lot of power as an engagement tool. So we've got this, Wikipedia is essentially, it's a ready-made crowdsourcing platform where volunteers can contribute on a huge range of topics backed by this huge community of experienced editors and all the technical infrastructure that's in place around Wikipedia, and share their work with such a huge global audience. So in the 7 years of working with Wiki, we've probably held close to 50 editathons with a lot more workshops, and we've helped create tens of thousands of new Wikipedia articles, mostly on the Welsh language Wikipedia. And it's been a way we found actually that hosting these events also acted as a way of engaging new audiences with library collections. So people that might not necessarily engage with the library came to us and were interested in using our collections and getting engaged with events at the library because of the kind of wiki element of it. Next slide. Thank you. So we've even developed partnerships with schools and the education department at the Welsh Government to improve content on the Welsh Wikipedia relating to the Welsh curriculum. And we ran a great project with the education department, and we actually employed a former history teacher to help us raise the quality of articles about Welsh history that we knew were on the education curriculum and were going to be used by children, because we found from surveys that we'd done in schools that a lot of the reason children used the English Wikipedia rather than the Welsh Wikipedia was because the articles were better. They were bigger, there was more content there, or the articles simply didn't exist at all in Welsh. So what we did is we took a whole bunch of articles and brought them up to a really high standard. We made sure that they had nice, simple language in the introduction to those articles, and we put in short videos in Welsh as well that children could use to help them understand subjects. So in terms of the kind of outreach work that we did, especially with children, it was about showing them that the internet is something that you can not just consume, but you can actually engage with and contribute to. Next slide, please. So quite early in the residency, as I was saying, we also started sharing those public domain images as a result of that policy change. And we shared those to Wikimedia Commons. And from there, people could use them freely in Wikipedia articles. So if we go to the next slide. So the impact of doing that became apparent quite quickly. So since 2015, we've shared 20,000 images to Wikimedia Commons. And those images have been used in Wikipedia articles in 90 different languages. And so far, we've racked up 1.5 billion views of Wikipedia articles that contain our images. And since our images have been used by such a huge website, they've also become much more discoverable outside of Wikimedia projects. So they often top Google image searches, for example. And we've seen examples of people reusing our images in books, in exhibitions, websites, on social media, etc. And these stats were actually really critical in informing that sort of strategic direction of the library and that decision to take on a permanent Wikimedian in residence, because you know, they could see quite clearly the reach that you could get through sharing this content on Wikipedia was something that you wouldn't get anywhere else. I think I did a calculation once that to get the same number of views that we do in a month on Wikipedia, it would take 100 years based on the stats on our own website alone. So, you know, these are really big figures. And we now report image views on Wikipedia as a KPI, as a key performance indicator back to our funders. Next slide, please. So I've got a couple of examples of reuse outside of Wikipedia as a kind of result of sharing images on Wikipedia. So the first image you see there is of a person holding a divining rod, which is used to find water. And this was picked up by a newspaper who were writing an article about water companies. So they found it on Wikipedia, on the article for divining. And they used that image in their article, and subsequently blogs were written, it was shared, picked up by other news outlets, and it ended up on about 20 different websites, this image, just as a result of that one news story and that one reuse, thanks to its visibility being on Wikipedia. They'd never have found that image in our catalogue. The other example there is a portrait of Sir John Williams, and this was, you can see it's animated, and this was done for a GIF competition, and it did very well in the GIF competition, and the person who created it also wrote a blog piece talking about how they created this movement. This was a few years ago. I imagine you could do this in about 5 minutes with AI today, but this was really really quite an innovative, cool thing when we first saw this. So that's just an example of a more kind of creative reuse of our images. Next slide. So we've also seen lots of partnerships and funding opportunities as a result of working with Wiki. So we've developed a really strong relationship with the Welsh Government, and we work with their Welsh language technology team. They give us funding most years to run projects to improve Welsh language content on Wiki. But we've also formed partnerships with Europeana, with various universities in Wales. And it's been a way of raising the profile of the National Library and forging partnerships with partners that we didn't have before, and have only happened as a result of being open with our content and being involved in Wiki. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the way that the project has kind of evolved into data. So over the last few years, we've done more and more with Wikidata. And interestingly, we first experimented with Wikidata after I went down to London to Wikimedia UK, to their offices, and heard a presentation by Nav, who you've all been introduced to today, and he kind of told me about this cool Wikidata project that was up and coming, and so we started playing with it, and yeah, it's become over time a really integral part of the work we do. So we all know that Wikidata adds value to our cultural collections, to our digital artifacts. Without the data, we wouldn't understand the context of the items, we wouldn't understand the history of them. So data is really important. And we were finding that we were sharing all these images to WikiMediaCommons, and we had a lot of great data for those images, but not a great way of sharing that data in an accessible way. So we turned to Wikidata. And Wikidata is, for those who aren't aware, it's a bit like Wikipedia, but for data. So the aim is to have data about everything and everyone, all types of knowledge, described in linked open data. So it's a very structured data set, and anyone can contribute to it, and anyone can take data out of it. I pinched this slide from an old presentation from a few years ago, where it says there are 20 million items in Wikidata. Well, if you look now, there are actually over 100 million. It's growing rapidly, much faster than Wikipedia actually these days. Next slide. So the first big data set that we released to Wikidata was the metadata for 5,000 Welsh landscape prints that we'd already shared to WikiMediaCommons. And this is the kind of structured data that you can get by extracting information from metadata and putting it into Wikidata in a more structured way. So we can see all the things that are depicted within this image. We can see Aberystwyth is depicted in the image, and it's also the work location of the bookseller who published the print. So you start to get all these kind of connections because of the structured nature of Wikidata. And we thought this was great. This is a great way of giving a lot more detail, and actually it enriched our metadata in ways that we hadn't even thought of before we started. So if we go to the next slide, this is an example that I always kind of use when I'm talking about the benefits of Wikidata. So when you extract from your metadata a tag that says this image depicts Aberystwyth or any place, Toronto, in your metadata, that's generally just a text string. Yeah, it's just the name of a place. It doesn't mean anything. But when you connect that to the Wikidata item for the town or the city that's depicted, you get access to a lot more information, including the coordinates of where that is on a map. So we were able to, for the first time, make a map like this of all the places depicted within this one collection. And this is something that we couldn't do before. We simply didn't have that data, but by aligning our data to Wikidata, we were able to do that. So the residency has really helped us kind of find ways of enriching our metadata and drawing on that wealth of information that the Wiki community has developed. Next slide. And Wikidata has a query service, which is essentially a way of asking really sort of complex questions of the data and being able to analyze that data in lots of different ways. So this bubble chart displays the most frequently depicted things in that collection that we were just looking at. So you can see there's lots of castles, lots of rivers, mountains, as you might expect of images of Wales. So if we go to the next slide, this is exactly the same visualization, but now it's in Welsh. And this was a kind of light bulb moment for us, because a lot of our metadata, unfortunately, is only in English. But by aligning it to Wikidata, like Wikipedia, is multilingual. So anyone can add to the item for a castle, the name, what is castle in French, in Welsh, in German, and anyone can add that information. So at the flick of a switch, we discovered that people can actually see all our data in Welsh without us having to do any kind of translation, because you make that alignment to the Wikidata items, and volunteers have actually added all sorts of different languages to those items, quite naturally. So we found, yeah, you can do this amazing switch and view data in different languages. And next slide. So this is another example of that kind of data enrichment. So we took metadata for manuscripts that we have in our collection. And this is one of our more notable manuscripts, which contains the Mabinogion, which is a medieval Welsh text. And you can see that by aligning your metadata to Wikidata, we've got all this extra information. So our metadata, it told us who owned the manuscript, but it didn't tell us where they lived or any information about the residency. We can see that the subject of one of the works is Magnus Maximus, who was a Roman emperor, but we didn't have any data about him, but Wikidata does. And so the way that this kind of linked data works is that we now have access to all that information. So if people searching our manuscripts want to know more about Magnus Maximus or other works that we might hold about him, all that data becomes connected. Next slide. So then we've been starting to think about how we round trip this data. So how we take this information that we've shared to the Wikimedia ecosystem and then brought it back into our own systems to improve the services that we provide our users. So this is one example. We shared biographical data of people in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography. So that all then existed on Wikidata, and we worked with Nav and Histopedia to develop this interactive timeline of all the people in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography. So this is powered by that Wikidata. It also gives you access to Wikipedia articles for all these people, and we ran volunteer projects to try and fill in gaps and make sure that everyone in the dictionary was represented on Wikipedia. And then, of course, we don't have images for a lot of these people. We do for some, but a lot of the images that you see here are from other organizations that have shared content to Wikimedia Commons. So these are all pulled in from Wiki, and it allows us to have a much more complete visualization than we would have with just our own content. And of course, this is also a fully bilingual interface. This uses the Welsh and the English data from Wikidata. So I would say that the best outcome of a residency is not just short-term engagement with a few nice events, but actually long-term systematic kind of embedded change within an organization, so that engagement with Wiki and other open projects becomes a natural part of an organization's operations. And I'm now the open data manager at the National Library, so that role has Wiki sort of firmly embedded in it. Most of the work I do is on Wiki, but it means that hopefully if I ever leave that role, it can be filled by someone who will pick up that work and keep working with Wiki, and it becomes more strongly embedded in what we do as an institution. Next slide. There we are. That's the end of my talk. I'm sure we'll have some time for questions later on, if there are any questions about that.
I have two questions. Do you have like age restrictions? I mean, you want to use it as a tool for kids in school, right?
Yeah.
So are there age restrictions? I mean, there's certain things that, or can they access everything?
So there are no age restrictions on Wikipedia. Actually, in the UK, there is a bill being proposed in Parliament at the moment that might place some restrictions on age, but currently there are no restrictions. And actually, anyone can edit Wikipedia, and some of the most prolific Wikipedia editors of all time are teenagers. So actually, there is no limit. So what we try and do, obviously, there is content on Wikipedia that isn't suitable for children. So we try and design events that we do with younger children to kind of have a safety net. So we ask them to work in groups under teacher supervision. We perhaps, if we go into a school classroom full of kids, they'll look at Wiki, they'll go away and they'll do some research and pull information together on paper, and then they will sit with a teacher who will help them input that data into Wikipedia. So that's the kind of thing that we do to try and ensure that they're not off looking at dodgy content. But I mean, from our experience, and we've worked with a chap in North Wales who goes in and does a lot of events in schools with Wikipedia, and I was talking to him about this, and he was saying children are pretty savvy these days, and if they want to look up something bad on the internet, they're not going to use Wikipedia. They're going to go elsewhere. So yeah, we perceive the risk to be actually fairly low.
I see. And the other question I had was, you were talking about events. Do you do themed events? So like it entices people, like saying like if there's a special like say for example, it's Black History Month, or which
Yeah,
is October in the UK, or Women History Month, or
yeah,
you do theme events tying in with the Wikimedian or Wikipedia.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I should have mentioned that probably, but yeah, all these editathons we do, very few of them are just kind of a generic come and edit. Virtually all of them have a specific theme. So to give you a few examples, yeah, we've done uh, art and feminism events. That's a kind of annual sort of campaign to improve content around art and feminism, and we go and work with local groups to deliver those. We did an event at the Welsh Rugby Stadium in Cardiff, and we actually sat in the stands and edited content about rugby, and we had an author of a book on the history of rugby to come along and give us a little talk, and he sat and edited with us and offered advice. So yeah, we try and we target groups that are interested in a particular theme, and we try and provide them with the resources that they need to edit. But also they're open to everything, and it's actually, we did an event on medieval Welsh law, and we had library staff, we had volunteers, members of the public, and then kind of world-renowned experts on the subject, all in the same room working together. And it's not often that you see that kind of collaboration happening, and it can be really nice to see.
Well, yeah, I think that's great, because if you have themed events, or it piques people's curiosity, and they would get involved, and they might stretch out and get involved in other areas of it too. So yeah, I just was wondering about that, but thank you.
No problem.
All right. Okay, so on we go.
Cool. Yes. So I think this is, I'll kind of talk through this one. So this is just a few kind of things to think about when you're getting started thinking about having a Wikipedian in residence or a Wikimedian in residence. So I think before you even think about funding, it's really important to be sure that your organization has a champion, or multiple champions ideally, support at quite a high level for the project and for the idea, and clear goals as to what you'd want to achieve with any residency. And I've actually, I've seen some residencies really fail to make an impact simply because the organizations were not actually ready in terms of policy and internal culture to facilitate the kind of work that a resident does. So that's something to be aware of. And then reach out to your local Wikimedia chapter or the Wikimedia Foundation, and we're going to have some more contact details shortly, I think, on different places you can go to sort of make contact with the community, with Wikimedia. And they'll be able to help you kind of point you to funding streams and case studies for residencies that, similar residencies. And I know Wikimedia UK, which is our local chapter here in the UK, they're able to provide organizations with sample job descriptions for residencies, for example, and templates for partnership agreements. So there's lots of kind of support out there in a lot of areas where there have already been residencies in the past. Residencies are usually short term. I've seen some very short residencies, but I think 6 months to a year is kind of ideal as a kind of minimum term in order to actually make an impact with a residency. And then kind of funding models vary. You've got, local heritage funders, innovation funds. There might be sort of various government funds that are available, or I've known organizations to fully fund residencies themselves and that's what the National Library of Wales ended up doing for a number of years. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to think about the long-term legacy of a project. It's a real shame if a residency comes and goes. You've maybe done a few events that are really nice, but then there's no, the residency ends and there's been no change in the organization. There's been no kind of adoption of new approaches to work on or policy that enables that wiki collaboration to keep going. So yeah, really think about the alignment with your goals and the kind of long-term potential for kind of embedding wiki work within an organizational structure and strategy.
If you're in Canada or the US, it's Chris. If you're in the UK, who would be your contact in the UK now? Our Jason, either.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's Wikimedia UK, isn't it? It's probably the place to contact. Yeah, which is easily discoverable. You just literally Google Wikimedia UK. They're a really sort of active local chapter. So.
And Chris also has some responsibilities for Central and Eastern Europe. So I guess if you're from that part of the world, and there was somebody who registered from Croatia, but she didn't show up. So there was somebody else from Nigeria. So I'm just showing this now, and I wanted to go back to the example of this visualization that we had. I think it's interesting for the work that we do when we target certain projects. Like Ron and I were talking about a project for Canadians of Black, African, Caribbean descent. And when you look, there's no WIRs in the Caribbean, and there are some in Africa. It's kind of interesting. Oh, we have somebody in the chat. The different colors mean anything? I'm not sure.
They do actually. They're the. I mean, they're not color coded as they'd like them to be, but they're actually the end dates. If you click on that little, there's a little in the top right hand corner, Victoria. There's a little layered icon. The other right.
Oh, I see. Yes, here. Okay.
Yeah, and if you click there, it'll show you what they mean. That's when their residencies are ending. So if you actually untick, you can click the top all layers one, and you can untick them all. But or you turn them off, and you'll start.
Well, and so this is good because then it lets us know people who are still in the role today, right?
Yeah.
And so
the no end date at the bottom was the one that would be.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
Actually active, but very. It's very handy. It would be nice if they had. I mean, there's so many things that you can show on these visualizations, and it's kind of like you're only limited by the data that's available, really, and so it does take a little bit of lateral thinking and like what are you trying to answer, and I think that's a logical thing for this visualization.
So here we have, in terms of Canadian content and Canadian culture, we have none in Canada. We have the US and we have Europe. So that's another really interesting point about the no end date and the role that those WIRs have with no end date. And Jason, you're an example of one of those, right?
Yeah. Yes. The map's really interesting. I think it's also worth mentioning this Wikipedian residence model is flexible, and I know one of the things they did in New Zealand actually. Not everywhere has the resources to have a dedicated Wikipedian in one organization, and what they did in New Zealand a couple of years ago is they had a roaming Wikipedian in residence who was funded from like a central kind of culture pot, and they spent a couple of weeks in each institution traveling around the country. So smaller museums and archives, and they traveled around all over the place for 6 months or a year, just kind of introducing basic wiki skills to lots of different organizations. So you can kind of think outside the box with this. You know, it's what works for the kind of resources that you've got and the things that you're trying to achieve. So yeah, it's worth thinking that there are these kind of flexibilities in the approach as well.
You've been watching a recording of a webinar held on December 6th, 2023. Our guest speaker was Jason Evans, Wikimedian in residence for the National Library of Wales. This webinar series is funded by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Wikimedia Foundation. I'm your host, Victoria Stilger.